we are living through a time of increasing crisis. What we see is only what they let us see. What we get is only what they give us. The idea that we can judge real AI dominance based on the models that are publicly available is ridiculous.
Trump and his team were using ChatGPT to get to some kind of tariffs calculation. But that's not the fact. But what I think will happen is what we saw with the chips as well. The moment they say to China, you don't get access to chips, China found different ways to create better chips.
Trump saying to China, you cannot have the best chips from American companies was like the Pearl Harbor of the tech industry. 3, 2, ignition! Welcome to another Innovation Network newsletter.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Aragorn, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good.
There's so much cool stuff to discuss today, but
yeah, we can almost go to a weekly newsletter, right? But yeah, it also is quite time-consuming as well. But the amount of news that comes in 2 weeks is just staggering.
Yeah, the idea has passed my mind as well, but
yeah. But if we continue with that rationale, we could do a daily one even, or
I guess it's just, and the thing is that it's just going to speed up, right?
It's just going to speed up, right?
It's maybe people. I mean, I think that at least I've experienced that there was a little bit of a slowdown in the AI hype this year at the start of the year. As a keynote speaker, I noticed because I had less bookings coming in. But I think that's just a kind of fatigue because people keep hearing about it all the time and they just don't really understand because they just see pictures and the world gets giblified, and we'll talk about that. But the reality is that it's actually just speeding up. So it's just a matter of time before the next really big thing happened. And maybe we already saw that, but yeah.
Yeah. And it could be a matter of fatigue. I think that applies to people like you and me that are in this and see it and could be fatigued, or business people. But you also have a lot of people that just have their focus on somebody else, right? Like if you are working on, I don't know, a farm or take care after a forest or something, or are a lot of in nature, you might now have no clue how fast these technical changes are developing. But
yeah. And then there's of course the consideration that we are living through a time of increasing crisis, right? We have multiple crises that are still fully developing, and we have a lot of uncertainty in the world. Geopolitical power shifts going on as we speak. Yeah,
interesting. So if you look back at the past 2 weeks, before we dive into the more kind of larger topics, anything outstanding from your side that is interesting to mention?
Well, I mean, so over the last 2 weeks, I've started doing keynotes again, and for those, I dove into using the newest ChatGPT image model, which I think we already covered in our last episode. Yeah. I've always also started using a lot more deep research, which we've already covered, and I started using the newest agents that are available, like Manus and the GenSpark Super Agent. And specifically, those last two have really been quite incredible to see how far AI is already going now in terms of it's developing into kind of agents. And you have had some really nice experience because vibe coding, of course, is vibe coding. Everybody and all the haters online are like, oh, technical depth. But the truth is that I think that technical depth is only going to be a problem very shortly. But you've had some cool experience, right?
Right, absolutely. And I think those haters are equal to the movie directors that 2 years ago were on stage and saying, hey, AI can never create a movie. Look what we have now. And it's the same for developers. AI can never develop. Well, if there's one thing that AI is developing quickly and fast, it is the ability to code. So, which also makes a lot of sense, right? This is created by technology companies, so they look how the AI should improve in different languages. Coding is their most important language, so that's where they focus on, and it just also on hyperspeed.
Yeah, I was going to say, we probably discuss this later on, but if you read Super Intelligence by Nick Bostrom, right? Which
is from which year is that? Because that's already a little bit of an old
quite
book,
old.
right?
Yeah, it's quite old, but it's actually staple, and it's so incredible to see how much he already kind of foresaw. It's the same with Ray Kurzweil, but Ray Kurzweil people didn't take him too serious. But Nick Bostrom, has been one of the biggest minds in terms of AI for a long time, and everything we're seeing happening today, maybe not exactly on a detailed level, but so much of it he discussed in his book about fast takeoff, slow takeoff, all of this.
Yeah, the book is, by the way, from 2014, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of tells how visionary the person was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
Absolutely.
is.
He's also the man behind simulation theory, by the way. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I kind of lost my train of thought there. I said we were going to discuss this later on. Oh yeah, so he said that the company that invents, first AGI, basically can no longer be caught up with. Right? I'm simplifying this because he
Yeah,
says if
yeah.
they have an AI that can develop its own AI, then there will be no way to catch up. Because if they have a head start, you can never break it because they'll always be developing faster than you can to catch up.
Well, I doubt that if that is going to play out like that. That could be true. That sounds very reasonable or logical. But when we witnessed all the power of OpenAI and thought, well, what a huge distance they have. Is Google ever going to come back from that? Google's going to fade away with their Google search. Now, guess what? Now Gemini is on par. And then you all of a sudden have DeepSeek. Technology can also be quite quickly be replicated and copied. And so I also see another path. Or you should have such an incredible big difference in intelligence. And so far, every new model that comes is topping the other model. So it's still a battle with a lot of them.
Yeah. Yes. But the thing that I think, and I had a week there where I really thought like you did, and I maybe said in the last newsletter, or at least last week, I definitely said it on a podcast, that America thought they would never be able to be caught again, and then China pretty quickly caught up, and all these models keep improving on the other one. But the thing I realized today, reading the paper that we'll be discussing AI 2027 and reading Anthropic's research, is that what we see is only what they let us see. What we get is only what they give us. The idea that we can judge real AI dominance based on the models that are publicly available is ridiculous. Because in this is, I've said this before, this is a new Cold War. We are, and the paper confirms that. We're skipping to the end of this newsletter, but the paper confirms this. But we are in a new Cold War. That is taking place. And in a Cold War, the two sides that are competing will never show the back of their tongue, as we say in Dutch. Laat het nooit achterste van de tong zien. They will never show their cards. So it becomes very hard for us to judge what's going on. And we can only assume that there are better models working in the background. And then the question is, how far have they already been using these models to develop new models? And that's where I come back to what you just said about language. They're probably already focusing on developing models that are specifically good at helping them develop the next model, and everything else is just secondary. So if they're good at see where this is going?
No, I absolutely see where that's going, but that could still play out from different AIs that are keeping something back and working on smarter models that could still be quite equally on par in a, let's say, intelligence battle with each other. And maybe the smartest move is not the most intelligent move, if you know what I mean. Maybe, well, if one of them is maybe pulling a trick in game theory, like we could do with chess as well. You could be the better chess player, but maybe once in a while, the best chess player also loses in a weird setup. Yeah. Well, let's see how this plays out. So what of course struck me this past days was the whole Cold War, but then the tariff war that was initiated, and there's a lot of
it. That's a part of it.
That's a part of it. That is a part of it. Exactly. That's what I want to go. Because a lot of posts online were about the fact, and they were kind of headlined with AI is causing an economic crisis. But what they meant to say with that is that the Trump and his team were using ChatGPT to get to some kind of Tariffs calculation. But that's not the fact. It is because they want to industrialize for the fourth industrial revolution. That is the real reason behind it. But I think that's not being called out too much in the mass media.
No, yeah, I think the mass media is just. I think the same thing I said. Like I feel there was a little bit of a slump in attention for AI in the first quarter of this year, and a lot of that has to do with the focus is on other things like Trump, and when the general media looks at what's going on with the tariffs, etc. The one thing I see time and time again is that all of these experts, well, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're only seeing one small part of the picture. They're all looking at this only through the lens of their particular kind of view on the world. And that's why AI and this whole new Cold War, technological Cold War that's firing up is left out of the picture most of the time.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, again, we'll get back to it also in the paper. It's being mentioned very specifically. I think that they're far more aware of it. And in regard to the ChatGPT and the economic tariffs, I personally think it's a little bit of a conspiracy theory where people, they think they see something and then they're just projecting because they don't really understand what's going on. And so they're just grasping at straws.
And I did that same request in ChatGPT, asking for, hey, if you would calculate the tariffs, how would you go about? And I get a more balanced answer than I see in most of the. But maybe they've changed that. I don't know. But the answer is more balanced. At least.
Not just that. I mean, look, whether you agree with them or not, but Trump has some people around him that are very intelligent, right? And the idea that he would just go to ChatGPT and ask, what tariff should I do? And then literally ignore everybody around him. Look, Trump is an egomaniac. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, not even Trump can be this stupid to think like, oh, I have the best experts in the country to assist me. And so instead I'm going to listen to T. Just come on, man. No,
I completely agree. Hey, so well, let's dive in a little bit. We talked about the speed of models, right? I've made a list of the 50 models released in 2 weeks. 40 of them are quite unknown, but here we go. DeepSeek has released version 3. Google Gemini has released 2.5. Ideogram 3.0. Riva Image. Alibaba came with 2 types of models, one even for animating of human characters. Midjourney is leveled up. OpenAI's AI generator. Runway and ByteDance came with Dream Actor. And then we have not even talked about Llama, which was missing from the list. I don't know why. Maybe they were cursed upon. But Llama 4 is also released from Meta. So we used to kind of, when a new model came out, let's say 6 months ago, we dove into it and we talked about it. But this is almost no way to keep up. So we have to pivot how we talk about it. And it's just very
but that's, I think you're really hitting the nail on the head here. And I think that's, on the one hand, we're getting this massive overload of models and information. So for any normal person, how do they make sense of it? What model do I try out or use, or what don't I? And this kind of will temper the enthusiasm even more of your average person to try and stay on top of AI. And maybe they really shouldn't have to. Maybe that's what we're for. On the other hand, it is also a wonderful signal of the exponential development that we've been talking about. Right? It's not just a matter that the models themselves are getting accelerating. I'm not going to say exponentially better, but that they're accelerating at a very rapid pace. But it's also that we're definitely seeing exponential growth or very strong growth at very least of the amount of models, the amount of companies working on them, the amount of money pouring into it, the amount of researchers developing it. And so this AI thing might now have been underway for like 2 or 3 years, but it's far from having peaked, right?
It's far from having peaked. And I was thinking about this, right? You have in anthropology, you have a guy called Dunbar. He came up with the Dunbar number. So in a social community, for a normal human, you cannot establish more meaningful relationships above the number 150. Otherwise, you kind of forget who people are, or they're not meaningful anymore. Yeah, it's the same that I kind of experience with my AI limit. That's probably not going to be 150. It's going to be different, but I kind of know how ChatGPT is reacting. I know how Claude is reacting. I have a couple of 5, 6, and I know you too, that I know this is for writing, this is for coding, this is for graphics. But there's a point there where you need another AI to make sense of where do you want to go, which is also already basically what we have now with agents.
Yeah, 100%. And look, there's gonna be a point where this will collapse, right? And that's literally what Satya Nadella said. And I have this video on my keynote where he says, like, in the agent era, we're all going to collapse is quite aggressively. Literally is what he says. So we're getting to a point where really for the user, it doesn't really matter anymore. There will be all of these models available in the background, and you could, if you want to, specify which ones you want to use and interact with. But ultimately, the interface that you have with it is going to be a single point of access where everything happens, and this is going to be your main agent. Right? So.
Yeah, I see that path too. But do you want such a path? So a couple of months ago, we had the shopping experience. So Perplexity is making the decisions where Perplexity is purchasing what you want to have. So you want to have a new laptop. And then perplexly decides which is the best one and where to purchase it. Some way, somehow, it feels like having options and getting some authority in making that decision feels human. I don't know. Feels pleasurable. Or do you just go, okay, I would accept one AI, and if it goes rogue, then I don't have any other options. That's the.
Well, I think that the thing is here that it differs per person, right? The level of granular control that you would like over things, really, I couldn't care less. We know this from experience, right? There's a reason that my wallpaper is falling off the wall over there, and I have, my computer here, and I'm not going to say how much I spent on that and how much time I've invested in it. So see, this is a matter of priority. As long as the options are there under the hood, you can fine tune that, then, it doesn't matter. But
That's the key.
Look,
that's the key. Yeah.
yeah, we're going to talk about a certain tech company that's falling far behind, but that specific tech company, aka Apple, did understand one thing really well, and that's that for the general user, for the mass audience, convenience is everything. Right? Your average iPhone user, they don't give a shit, right? Apparently, they don't even care enough to want something that's really, state of the art. They are perfectly happy using something that has been available on Android for a decade, and they still feel that they're super cool with it. So yeah, I think that we're also just not a good judge for what people ultimately want.
So, as you mentioned Apple, and I'm a big Apple user. I'm not as satisfied as I once was, but we'll park it a little bit later. But maybe this is a tip for Apple users, because if you're an Apple, you do not get confronted with, for instance, Gemini. And one of those big updates was Gemini 2.5. It's available for everybody now. And definitely play with it, check it out, because the intelligence of the model and also the context window, which is almost 1 million, meaning that you can upload entire books to ask questions about, is impressive. And the way that it services you and answers questions is really a big step up from 2.0.
Yeah. So I do want to emphasize there's no Gemini 2.5. There's only Gemini 2.5 Pro. That's the only model. So no confusion necessary there. You have 2.0 Flash and then 2.5 Pro.
Yep.
Go and check it out. Another thing, you mentioned the context window is super important, because up until now, Gemini 2.5 or Gemini models were the only models with a tokens context window up to 1 million, which means, that it can read a whole book and it can remember the first till the last word. But actually, Llama 4 from Facebook also has a mass. Yeah, go on.
10 million.
Yeah.
10 million content. So that's
10x
of Gemini 2.5 Pro.
Yeah. Now, I haven't seen the benchmarks yet, because the question then becomes, if it can have a context of 10 million, can it actually remember everything within that context window, right? Because what we've seen in models in the past is that they might have a slump in attention in the middle. So they technically have the context window, but they don't consider what's in there. So that's going to be important. But yeah, this is quite important when this is ramping up, because this will significantly improve kind of the use cases for these agents. Because to give an example for people listening, I use a Claude specific project to create LinkedIn posts, right? So I always write the rough draft, but I give it to Claude, and I have this single thread which has been open for long past the token window, and then it will restructure and some minor reformulating or grammar, spelling, all of that, and then write my post. But it's only because I always ask it to do exactly the same thing that long past the context window, it keeps doing it, because basically it still understands from the context window before that what's supposed to happen. But if you have a particular conversation that goes in different directions on a topic, and the queries you put in are different every single time, then if you get to the end of the context window, then it really doesn't understand where the conversation started anymore, and you start to get some really weird answers. And so basically, the context window is the short-term memory of an AI. And imagine talking to somebody that forgot what the conversation was about after 5 minutes.
Yeah,
can be very, very cool and not cool. Yeah.
Would be like Memento, right?
Memento.
You have to tattoo everything in your arms.
Yeah. And again, we'll cover this in the paper maybe, but the paper that we are going to talk about, 2027, also says that this is one of their big expectations, is that we'll very quickly see the development of other kinds of memory or technologies that will supplement a long-term memory for AI, which will also be really important for developing its capability.
Yeah, if we are already on a context window of 10 million, and that's going to exponentially grow as well, how much do you need for my entire conversation to be part of the memory of my desired AI?
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
Actually, you said something to me earlier, Patrick. As we're moving on with the newsletter, maybe to the next topic. We talked about Manus, and basically we're both impressed. But you said, yeah, it's. What do you remember what you said earlier today?
No, yeah, well, we talked a lot. So what part are you referring to?
Well, you said it can and it's still not an agent that will keep updating what it did and then remind you or be there in the background always to kind of continue working for you.
Exactly, and I'm not 100% sure if I'm right because I just have access and just played with it, but it still seemed like you give a command like a deep search, it comes back with a very good answer like a deep search, but it's not a kind of a sleeping agent that, for instance, every time I got an email, it kind of picks it up and then sends something out. That it requires a level of integration to be set up manually.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that this, so I'm just going to show my Manus here to show a little bit of what I've been playing around with. But that ties into that, right? Because the current AI models cannot have long-term memory. So that is why they cannot remember that and then remind you tomorrow or update something or whatever, right? So this is important. But Manus has truly brought us into the agentic age in terms of what we can do with it. So this was just an example. I asked it to research technological development, trying to establish whether the thesis that I had might be correct, and then do the research. And then ultimately it does a lot of research. It spent 20 minutes on this. It completes a bunch of tasks. Then it came back with questions for me at some point. I'm not really sure where, but it asks you questions to clarify what you want. I gave it extra instructions because I wanted some things changed, etc., and it just keeps going. Then I asked it to add things because it makes a website, and
I like it as well because now you've added your name and your speaker details to the website. It almost became a completely professional website, and only with these quotes, right?
Yes, exactly. So if I show the early version here, so this is one of the first versions, and you see it has tech evolution and it has a conclusion, findings, intro. This was
do you get a new URL every time?
So this is, you get a new URL. So this was one of the first iterations that it developed. And you probably see here that I found a mistake because it said 300,000 years. So I had to go over that and check whether that was just a spelling mistake or whatever. This is one of the first versions. And then, like you said, I told it that, I would like to add some stuff to the website. I would like to include links to It's Mr. Metaverse and Innovation Network so that when I share this with clients at a keynote, they also, of course, we have some lead generation, etc. And so there were several iterations in between, but the final iteration was this one. So you see the colors have changed a little bit. Conclusions there. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure, but the color changed just ever so slightly. And I think the difference is between the color of our Innovation Network website and my It's Mr. Metaverse website. It also made it so that it functions on mobile. Well, you can't really see that here, but I gave it a mobile site. And now you see speaker. So I got this nice little biography, keynotes, and it goes to my website, and Innovation Network, it goes to our website. And so I'm still fine-tuning this. I'm going to make another version, but this kind of goes over the data and the highlight of my thesis on technological development. Yeah. And what I was super impressed still is that it actually came up with a way to kind of measure technological progress. And then it said, well, technically the last 300 years, we had 73.5%. And only in the last 350 to 400 years did we have the 99% that I was talking about. So that's more or less since the printing press. Yeah, I still think it's extremely cool.
Completely agree. I was wondering, I don't have the answer, but maybe we can talk a little bit about it. So DeepSeek comes out. Everybody is saying, well, you are completely crazy if you trust your data. It's Chinese, it's everything. Manus comes out and everybody goes like, wow, this is amazing. And you hear nothing about it. Nope. It is based in Singapore, but it is a Chinese startup. What do you think? What's going on there? Is it just...
No, I think it's just a perfect example of where the focus is. Yeah. Like the idea that people really care about that is a fugazi. And should they? Maybe they should. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but the fact whether they are or not is fully dependent on how they perceive something. And I think that the main reason for this discrepancy between how DeepSeek was received and how Manus is received is to do with how easy it is to to test. What happened when DeepSeek came out? Everybody saw another AI that can answer questions. And so the first thing that people thought is like, ask it what happened in Tiananmen Square, right? And then it gave a shitty answer. And therefore a whole thing went online about how bad it is.
Exactly. But somebody must have asked that same question to Manus, right?
Well, maybe, but maybe you think so, maybe not, because Manus is perceived not as an oracle to give answers. Manus is perceived as an agent to execute tasks. Yeah. So I don't know, and maybe people. There's also, of course, a chance that people said, "Well, let's not mention it because we don't want it to be banned." Because it's maybe even the tech bros are like, "Oh, this is doing a lot of good work for me. I don't want people to stop this, right?" And I have to be honest, I fed it my whole point, which I've worked on for years now. And only after I did that, I thought, did I just basically give everything that I developed away? Because now it's in Manus. There's no doubt about that. Like these Chinese people have my PowerPoint now, and there's nothing I can do about it. But yeah.
Yeah, well, but yeah. We know how you think about intellectual property, so you shouldn't have a problem sharing that with them, right?
No, I don't really. So yeah, but so last thing to say about this. Manus came out. We've been excited. Not literally a few weeks after we got GenSpark. The thing is, GenSpark is basically another Chinese AI company which also launched an agentic AI. So here you see on the left they have Super Agent. Actually, if I go to home, it's probably gonna...
I immediately see that they have video generation as well. I didn't notice anything like that in Manus. Could you here also include that? For instance, automatically create, let's say, a cartoon of this conversation and post it online?
Yeah, so it has a video generation, but it's not their own. So it basically, this is Perplexity for video generation, where it gives you a mixture of agents. That's one that they do have. Select the best models for your task. But basically, mixture of agents means, as far as I can tell, I haven't really tried it yet, by the way, but basically, as far as I can tell, it just picks an agent, but it gives access to several of the leading ones, including some Chinese ones. So I haven't really played around with it this much yet, but I do... Yeah, it has a deep research functionality, which I have used, and it was quite impressive. And it has a super agent functionality. The thing is that you get all of this for $40 a month. So there is definitely that added value of, you're paying quite a lot of money, but you get quite a lot for it. You just get the super agent, the deep research, the call for me, the data search, just a cross check. But again, this is also a Chinese company as far as I know. The call for me is quite interesting. I haven't tried it yet. I was going to try it on you today, but I didn't get around to it before the newsletter. But supposedly this works quite well. Oh, wait, I support calls to the US, Canada, and Japan. I didn't click on that yet. Okay, so it's not going to work for us. I am afraid. Too bad. But that is an interesting use case, of course.
Where is this coming from? Is this a US-based company?
No. Do
you know where it's coming from? Because why is it only calling to the US and Canada and Japan?
Oh, it's headquartered... Wait, main funk company behind GenSpark is headquartered in the United States. Okay, maybe I'm wrong then. Maybe it is from the US. Also, it has all the models in here. I didn't realize that either. This is the first time I'm seeing this, except for 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. Yeah, well, maybe it is a US company. It's from Georgia, United States. Umbrella of Pyramid Consulting. Okay.
That was a different umbrella than you had before. Mindfunk, was it?
Oh, no, wait. GenSpark this is another company.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Mind map. Okay, this is new.
Oh, it's interesting. They probably had the tabs from the website or something like that. Yeah.
Palo Alto. So GenSpark AI is in Palo Alto, California. Oh, so it is in the US. That is interesting. I was not aware of this. And we didn't fact check this, but
it's fun to see. Let's move on to the next one.
Oh my God.
How
long do we have left?
Yeah,
okay,
no.
38 minutes.
Let's time box this section, but we do want to share it. Everybody listening, I absolutely invite you to read through this or make a summary with your favorite AI, or at least watch the video here. But basically what happened is that Tropic did a new study, and we've always referred to a large language model as a black box, not knowing what is happening inside, similar to how our brain operates, obviously. But now with some smart tricks, they have discovered quite a few interesting things. And so, for instance, one of the things that I'm just going to scroll a little bit through this is that they discovered that Claude is using a complete language on its own, an antonym concept for words, before translating it to any other language. So if you start with English, it goes back to that antonym concept and then is transferred back to the opposite of English or another languages you have. And we didn't know that was happening within a large language model, right?
No. But Patrick, look, I don't know how to say this because it's always going to sound super arrogant, but were you really surprised about this?
No, the thing is, the things that come out of here, I'm not surprised, but it's the first time that they are proven. Let me go to the bottom one, because that is where I'm not surprised at all. But and then in fact I am. This is a very complicated thing, right? But if you ask a large language model like Claude to calculate 36.59, it's going through a quite elaborate process. But what it does numbers as ending in 6 and 9 that should equal 5. That's a very similar way to a human, right? So I make a guess towards what that is, 6, 9, 5, and then 8, 9, okay, 95. That's how you kind of go to it as a human. And it turns out that Tropic is, for the large language model, is doing that the same way.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing in this paper. Look, I love reading this paper, don't get me wrong, but I found that they also have this point where they said what was it? Oh yeah, this is with the poem, right?
Yeah, the poem is the poem. This is the poem. This poem is absolutely super cool.
Okay, yeah. So they went into it thinking that Claude only predicts the next word. That's what they thought. This is the people that built it. And the big argument, and this has been ongoing for a long time, because there is even a computer science professor at the University of Nijmegen in Radboud in the Netherlands, which I have been at odds with now for 2 years, because when AI this first came out, she started posting about how this AI was all bullshit. It could never become intelligent. It was all stochastic parrots. Stochastic parrot means it just repeats back to us stuff. And she was always like, no, it's only predicting the next word. And this is the arguments of all the skeptics, all the people. Like they say, it's just a prediction machine that predicts the next word. And my argument has been for 2 years now that all of these people are completely ignoring the basic concept of complexity theory, where in these complex systems, we see these emerging properties. And we've seen these emerging properties, but despite them showing up time and time again, people keep pretending that it's not happening. But here is now the proof. Here is the proof in this paper by Claude, because what did they conclude against their own expectations is that the model is already predicting ahead what it thinks the outcome is going to be, then it kind of works towards that. So it's planning ahead. So this is Jean LeCun.
AI systems are in many ways very stupid. We are fooled into thinking they are smart because they can manipulate language very well. They don't understand the physical world. They don't really have any persistent memory of the type that we have. They can't really reason and they can't plan. And those are essential characteristics of intelligent behavior.
Okay, and this is, look, everybody that follows me knows that I don't really like Jan LeCun. He might be a genius who did more for AI than, pretty much everybody else in history. But the guy just doesn't understand what he himself helped build. Because here he says that the LLMs cannot plan ahead. But we have proof now that they do, right? This is the fundamental thing that I want to point out here, is that even these experts that are right on top of it, the people that are developing it, they can't see the forest for the trees, because they are so caught up in the actual engineering of it that they don't see that on a much grander scale, there are things happening that they can't fully comprehend. And that is leading somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that even though I'm an idiot who never finished university and everybody says that I'm a crazy person, I was not surprised by this, because it makes total sense to me.
As a matter of fact, I was also surprised the other way around, right? How can you create a good poem that makes sense, or write a good story that makes sense, if you go word by word by word? I've always believed, because that's what we've been told. And then because this example also, the more you look at it, the more the whole concept kind of, you can digest it. So you say, he saw a carrot and had to grab it. Then the LLM starts creating the second sentence. And then he knows how that it goes about. It is about a carrot. He needs to grab it. So rabbit is very likely to. And he starts with rabbit and then builds up the sentence towards the rabbit. But if you change that word, then you get a completely different sentence that also makes sense. which is kind of, and if they do a completely word doesn't rhyme, it also does that.
Exactly.
So that's how they proved basically that it can predict to the end of the sentence, but it can also predict to the end of a document or to the end of a concept in reasoning towards something. And guess what?
Exactly.
It is also what we, in a way, also do, right? We have multiple options where we want to end or reason to, and we'll find a way to something, sometimes not even before we understand it ourselves, because our senses have already digested the information and we reason towards a conclusion.
Yeah. But it's, and so exactly. And the thing is that time and time again, what I see is that these models being developed as neural networks based on the fundamental mechanisms that we've found in the human brain but don't fully comprehend, it is developing like a human. And it gets even worse because Jan LeCun also says, yes, large language models can never fully understand the world because they've only been trained
wrong again.
on language. But as we have just concluded, which you pointed out from this paper, we know that these models, once trained, they don't even think in language. They think in abstract concepts already that they then translate into language. So what we're seeing is that even though they're only trained on language, they're already developing capabilities that far exceed the limitations of language alone. And people like Jan LeCun are just like, oh, yeah, this is not going on. They're just trying to ignore what we're actually literally seeing.
and now we're getting to a step further. This is, of course, a big debate. Can AI become conscious? And a lot of people say, no, for this and that kind of reasons, they cannot, like Jan LeCun. But if I see something like this, and it mimics our brain so well, and with the exponential speed, so why not? Why would it not at some point become conscious? Maybe a different conscious than we are aware of, but I don't see any hurdle on getting there, to be honest.
Well, Geoffrey Hinton is, of course, another godfather of AI next to Jan LeCun, and he's been saying for a while now that he believes that these models are already conscious, right? And people portraying Geoffrey like he's the crazy person now, but he's been saying this. And then if we jump ahead to the 2027 paper that we're covering at the end,
before
they
we go.
literally... Yeah.
Oh yeah, you want when you jump in immediately to?
I wanted to jump there.
You want to go there? We will finish on it.
Okay.
Before we go there, let's talk a little bit about the fact that the Turing test has also been. Yeah. What?
Yeah. Nah. I'm like. I feel. Oh man. I just feel it's so stupid. Like everybody's now the Turing test has been passed. Man, the Turing test was passed a year ago. What are people on it? Like what the hell? Like I'll tell you something, right? I asked, was it Manus? No, I think I asked Jen Spark. Maybe it has done that, to develop me an app that can search through to our YouTube videos to find what we said, so that I can confirm that we already said this. Because when I asked Gemini, it said, well, I can only do one video at a time. So that was taking too long. But I am 100% certain that a year ago in this newsletter, we already discussed how the Turing test already had been passed, but that nobody gave a shit. And now 1 year later, everybody's like, we passed the Turing test.
Hey, that's the story of your life, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the downside of an early adopter, right? That you sometimes see something, and it takes a while before other people see that. And the goalposts of this Turing test, of the way it gets interpreted or AGI gets interpreted, is also shifting, right? This was the report basically. So they did read it again, the Turing test on different models. And this is the highest score that I have also seen yet, because always you can fool a couple of people. But with GPT 4.5, with creating a specific persona that you were talking, so you were expecting, for instance, to speak to Aragorn, a future historian. Is this the real Aragorn or not? I think it was 73% didn't tell which it was. As a matter of fact, they pointed out that the AI model was the real human. Without a persona, it's much less so. As you can see here.
But maybe you know this because you went into this a little deeper than me. Who were the people that they tested this on?
Oh no, I don't know. I didn't know that. I didn't dive deep into this test. Maybe we can find out.
The thing for me seems to be that the whole thing around the Turing test, and this has a lot to do with the ambiguity that Turing himself allowed, right? Because Turing never specified what the test should be or within which kind of parameters it should operate. And so the whole thing with the Turing test is it's just been one big massive goalpost moving session, right? Because you could still say now, well, if GPT 4.5 talks to a physics professor, then the physics professors will know it's an AI 9 out of 10 times. Right, because GPT 4.5 cannot logically reason, so the professor asks one question, and the answer will probably already give it away. And this is the whole problem with this Turing test. It's not so much about the AI, it's about what are we testing it against. And in my personal opinion, it should be tested against, an average bandwidth that represents 85% of people, right? So it should be able to fool people that have an IQ, up to maybe 110 or 100 and maybe 115. And it should only have a conversation about, average topics and not go really deep. But then other people will say, well, then it's not really passing the Turing test because and that's the thing. That's the thing.
Participants. Okay, let me.
Here we go. Yeah. So there's so many things that I'm seeing here, right? Because how old are these people?
Well, they are psychology undergraduates, so they're young. They're below 25.
So what does that already tell us about their life experience? It's going to be limited. I mean, they're half my age, and most of their life was spent in diapers. So I'm actually
right. But equally, I think the Turing test would first pass on all the people with a lot of life experience, because these people do understand a little bit what technology is about and have a phone and AI at their disposal. So you don't trick them that easily, I would state. So it kind of balances it out.
I would disagree. But you are a little older than me. But we lived through the move from analog to digital. So we understand more of how technology, has become where it is today, and therefore its pitfalls. So yes, if older people that are much older than us would do bad, but younger people, Gen Z, my godchildren, they expect technology to always work flawlessly. Like they're the iPhone generation. If it's not convenient and easy to use, they don't just give up on it because screw it. We have a different kind of perception. So I'm just saying, my point is that all of this matters. Like, how old were the people that they tested? These are psychology undergrads, which means they're already in the top 15% of most intelligent people in the country as well. Right. Which means exact. So the only thing that they proved is that now the Turing test is passed on a base academic level.
Okay.
Well, that's great.
Let's keep it as that. Final conclusion. That's what they prove.
Yeah.
It also is still to be peer reviewed. So, okay, let's move on to something that is intervening with every topic that we had, and that is this particular. What do you call it? It is a combination to an essay, a report, a story, and a prediction. And it is super cool. I'll let you go first, buddy.
Really? I don't know if you should do that. How did you think it read? How did you How did it make you feel?
Okay, I'll be honest. I had a weekend off, and I saw this in the beginning of somewhere mid last week. I said, wow, this is interesting. And only this morning I had time to read it. And reading is a large word. I scrolled through the concepts of it. And basically it is a prediction and an essay where they, in a storyline, build up towards the year 2030 about what's going to happen there. And it's very similar to the trend line that you lay out in your predictions towards 2030. A lot of elements are there. This is a really good capture of how AI could develop, how exponential growth is going. So this is a super cool read. And what I really like about it is then once you read it, look at the top right. So you're in May 2025. You see, for instance, the amount of unreliable agents that are operating at 8 times human speed. There's only 2, so that means 4,000. If you scroll through it in time, you get to certain other time frames. Let me scroll a little bit further so you see more impact. And you see science fiction tech moving to emerging text, moving to currently exist in a very cool way. And now we have 22,000 reliable agents thinking about 13 times human speed. Yeah. And the way that they build it up is just super cool to read. I think what I definitely also like is that at a certain point in time, what is it? You see, it's a long story. It's absolutely worth your time. I think tonight I'm going to go over the whole story. So here we are.
Oh, here at the end. Choose your ending. Choose your ending.
Yeah, choose your ending. So you're here in October 2027. And there's a big debate in the story about where do we want to go with government oversight, like we also had in 2024, but a little bit bigger. Where do you want to go? Slow down or race? And then you go, for instance, for race, and then you get a storyline turns red, and it goes further till 2030.
Yeah. So
what are your observations from this document?
Yeah, I think you really highlighted quite a few nice things. But what really struck me is, first of all, that I initially started reading it and I was like, hey, wait, is this a paper or is this a story? And then they write something all the way at the top. I think they write this: everything we did here is a combination of research, extrapolating trajectories, which is what I've been doing for the last 2 years with my story. And then they said something interesting, which I haven't really included in anything I've done, but they said, and an application of game theory and war games. And that is something that I thought was really cool, because it seems to me that they've actually somehow done some simulations, war game simulations on this as well. And I thought that was super interesting, because I have not done that myself. But that is also, I think, the main reason why it's written the way it is, because what it is, it's a war game generated scenario ultimately, or it kind of has that vibe to it.
Yeah.
Because if you read it, it basically tells a story of what's happening in the world, right? They have deep send versus open brain, which are obviously, I mean, they couldn't make it more obvious. And it does pit the whole story in the kind of context of the Cold War, like we discussed. It's the second Cold War. Exactly. It's a Cold War between China and the United States about AI dominance and the impact that will have on the world. And as you see that this visualization at the right that you showed is clearly showing, how things in just a set of key metrics are progressing over time, from everybody thinks it's science fiction to reality. I find that super, super interesting, because, like I said, I've been talking about this for a while, but I've basically done some kind of intuition-based, neurodivergent kind of, I have a feeling about this kind of history research, right? So I didn't do a meticulous, peer-reviewed research into this of months with other people and then have it peer-reviewed or anything like that. I basically, I'm just looking at the history and I'm just translating what I see, what I think, what I'm extrapolating. And that's a fact, right? I'm not ashamed of that. So to read this, for me, was like massively vindicating. And the only thing that I can say bad about it is that I remember the words of Jeroen Peerbolte, one of our ambassadors, who's been saying to me for now almost a year that I should create a timeline. And what he meant by that is this. This report is what he meant by that. And I should really try and make something like this on a little longer scale, maybe to 2035. But everything that's in here, sure, there's details in there and some very specific pieces on technology development. For example, the creation of a centralized focus zone, what's it called, in China, with the biggest compute cluster in the world, and how America is trying to build their own, and they go into the cybersecurity challenges at Open Brain, which is, of course, a synonym for Open AI, and how China will ultimately end up stealing models. But they also significantly cover how, for example, America is trying to actively hamper China's ability by, for example, boycotting them so they cannot get the newest chips, and how this is also fueling the tension in the Chinese Sea with Taiwan, because Taiwan is literally next to China, and this is interesting for people to hear. I don't know if you know this, but why did America win the Second World War against Japan? And maybe you say atom bomb. Atom bomb definitely helped finish it, but why did they really win? Because at the start, the Americans had Pearl Harbor bombed, so they lost, 1/3 of their fleet, and China had basically more naval power. The reason America won the Second World War in the Pacific was because their capacity for building ships was like 10x better than Japan. So they could produce ships, aircraft carriers, destroyers so fast that China was losing ships and couldn't replace them, but America was constantly increasing its fleet. And if we look at the world today, and this was recently multiple times mentioned, it was mentioned by J.D. Vance, which I found surprising, because this is the vice president of the United States admitting to this. And it's been mentioned by Anduril founder Lucky Palmer multiple times, is that if right now America and China would go to war and they would have a naval war, America would lose. Yeah. Because they cannot produce anything. They have no production capabilities. Every single aircraft carrier lost, every destroyer lost, would take them a massive amount of time to replace. And China can produce ships at more than 100 times faster than the US. And not just that, China for years has set the basic requirement for every ship built in China, so commercial development, they have to be made to military spec. That means that every single ship in the Chinese fleet, even if it's commercial fleet, can be transformed into a military ship tomorrow, and it will meet military grade requirements.
That is a smart move. And
Exactly.
on top of that, this is just a material warfare, right?
This
On
is
top,
the real
so
warfare.
this is the key element of the strategy of the US, right? Oh, not only in putting the industrialization back in place for creating the hardware, the materials, and also the intelligence to kind of disrupt markets, way of thinking, everything in there.
Exactly.
And you could also argue where
yes.
US is currently compared to China. We don't know.
Yeah. And this is why I don't think that there's any realistic chance of Russia doing anything in the Ukraine, because Russia has absolutely nothing. Their economy is on the brink of teetering on the brink of complete collapse. They have no production capabilities. This is also why Trump is so actively pursuing the current trade tariff thing, because he wants to create a scenario in which he brings a lot of the production capability back to the United States. This is why he wants Canada and Greenland, because they provide a massive amount of resources on their doorstep, so they will not be dependent on other nations. All of this has to do with that.
All of this has to do with that, but what I think will happen is what we saw with the chips as well. The moment they say to China, you don't get access to chips, China found different ways to create better chips, to create them. And I think that Europe is now ramping up on military equipment, on military. We're recruiting 200,000 new soldiers here in the Netherlands. All these things are put into motion thanks to what Donald Trump is now doing here.
And wonderful. You actually hit the nail exactly on the head, also where I wanted to go with it, because this is, I think, the one and only significant strategic mistake that Trump made so far. Despite me thinking he's an idiot, this is something in his previous term, he aggressively started to kind of build a trade block to China, so they couldn't get the newest NVIDIA chips in this. And although this maybe seemed smart, it was an incredible short-term kind of way of doing things, because the only thing he's done is he's woken up the beast.
Right.
Basically, Trump saying to China, you cannot have the best chips from American companies, was like the Pearl Harbor of the tech industry. Because what happened after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor? The Americans said, oh, okay, now you've done it. We're going to ramp up our production capabilities. We're going to bring our global leading economy to life, and we're going to crush you. And that's exactly what China is doing right now. Because,
and not only the nations on their own, there will be new alliances forged around this against the US on a scale that is, I don't think they anticipated that scale, and overlooked themselves as the biggest consumer market. There are only 350 million people in the US, something like that, close to that.
Yeah, correct.
That's not the biggest consumer market in the world, right?
No. So although I understand to some extent the choices that are being made, and I understand that Trump and Vance, etc., they want to make America strong again, but the thing that they really lost focus of is that America, even at its absolute peak, is not stronger than the collective that it was a part of in NATO, etc. And it's making enemies left and right, and it's actually fueling its greatest enemy, who was already economically catching up and who is a absolute powerhouse, China. They're just fueling every single incentive that China had to kind of get rid of their dependence on anything US, and therefore they're losing influence and power. So actually, I've had this kind of doomsday clock for civil war in the United States, and Trump, being good or bad. Before Trump got elected, I thought that getting Trump elected would reduce it. And now we're 6 months in, and I'm thinking, well, we're not even 6 months in. What are we in? 4 months till he effectively,
right?
since he effectively took office. I honestly think that the chances of the U.S. completely breaking down into civil war within the next 5 years are significantly going up right now, because he's creating so many. I mean, they're trying to make America stronger, but they're going to end up weakening America significantly, in my personal expectation. And so coming back to this, with Taiwan and ASML and their production facilities and of course TSMC, all Taiwan's semiconductors, all being on an island off the coast of China, and China already basically having, it's almost just a matter of time, right? So that's something to really think about. And this paper deals with that. So even for that alone, I would highly recommend people reading it. But we are on the brink of a convergence of so many things. The geopolitical landscape is going to completely alter over the next 10 years. The global economy is going to completely change, and AI is going to be forefront center everywhere.
Yeah. So do read this. If you are running a business, this gives you great guidance of your entire landscape and context of development of AI for the coming years. It's an absolutely great story. Let's wrap it up with Byung-Chul Han. Yeah.
I want to say thank you for letting me go on my rant.
No, this was a lovely rant. It's a lovely rant. Yeah. Let's wrap it up with a writer that we also recommend. So I'm talking about Byung-Chul Han. He writes these types of books, right? So if you like philosophy, but you're always kind of, I don't know, see it as a big mountain, those complicated books, those complicated words, this is something for you. Very easy to digest. It's only 80 pages or something like that. And it's very much on topic, right? If you go to classic philosophy or you go to Hegel, you try to read that and apply what can you do with it today, it's going to be difficult. This person writes about the amount of information that you have to digest, or that we avoid pain in stuff. And his latest book, and I wrote a review about it, will be included in the newsletter, is about the disappearance of rituals, which you can read in various ways, but the moment that you just reflect, right, is a ritual. I just recently have a dog. Walking a dog 2 times a day becomes a ritual to kind of digest the information. Meditation is a ritual. But for some groups of people, praying is a ritual. And it really got me thinking in everything that we do, it goes high-paced, it doubles every month. It's very important to also have these rituals. And the way that he describes it is just an interesting read. So big recommendation.
Man, this is firing so many neurons in my brain.
Yeah.
Like I've always wondered why Japanese culture at its peak during, the samurai ages, etc., and even to this very day, in some ways, is so much more advanced than Western civilization. And I just realized that like their whole culture is built on ritual, right?
He points out what the Japanese are doing specifically, and indeed, that's very much built upon their rituals. I'm going there this summer for 3 weeks, and I just cannot wait to see how that still applies today. And it's going to be interesting. Awesome. Any more to say about what are your rituals? What's your ritual to kind of?
I have loads of rituals. Yeah. So if you think about it that way, like so one of the rituals. So for me, being very neurodivergent, I found that the rituals are one of the strongest ways for me to kind of anchor myself in a place where I don't, I lose control of things. And so I have rituals where, I always have the same morning ritual, right? I get up, I walk to the kitchen, I make fresh coffee grounded from fresh beans. I put that up. Then I take my lemon juice with my apple cider vinegar and my cayenne powder. And then I go to the shower. And then even in the shower, after I'm done, I do my moustache. Like all of this sounds maybe ridiculous, but I do that almost exactly the same way every single day, and I build on that routine to do the things that I might not always enjoy, but that because the things that I like the least, I do them at the end of that routine because then they become necessary to finish the routine. Actually, now I'm thinking about this, I remember that in the paper from Anthropic, they say that Anthropic sometimes starts to answer questions when it's being jailbreaked, and they said, so why does it do that? And then it said, well, because it has all these rituals, these routines, that it needs to finish. So it's almost obsessive compulsive behavior from a human that I have, and that routines can strengthen in the right way, right? Because then you need to finish the routine, right? It's like, so anyway.
Well, cool. Well, thanks. It was a pleasure again to go over all this. I'm looking forward to our next recording and see what we have to discuss. You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for reading. If you like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and forward this to your friends and family. And that's it for now. So, like they say in the Netherlands,
zie je later.
See you later.
Bridging the gap of exponential growth. Patrick and Aragorn share the truth. Join our community, let's innovate. With Innovation Network, create a brighter fate.